The official opposition wants to go to voters over the carbon tax. Pierre Poilievre told his caucus this morning that he will force a vote on a non-confidence motion in the Liberal government over the carbon tax, and that's going to happen tomorrow, prompting this exchange in question period.
Every single province in which this tax applies, the middle-class families pay vastly more than they get back. Why don't we just end the debate and let Canadians decide and have a carbon tax election?
We are busy delivering for Canadians a price on pollution that puts more money in the pockets out of 8 out of 10 families across the country. And an election on the price on pollution, we had 3, Mr. Speaker, and we won them all.
Then he shouldn't be afraid to have one more.
Okay, it's not a new threat, but it keeps getting repeated. What should Canadians make of this, and who's going to win this battle of political optics over the carbon tax? Power panel's back on that. Sherelle Evelyn, Tim Powers, Jonathan Kalis, and Brad Levine. So Tim, Conservatives want an election.
The election is coming.
Well, there you go. I think even Ken McDonald will vote with the Liberals on a non-confidence motion. The eagerness to have an election over carbon pricing must mean one thing: that the Conservative climate plan is ready to go and to be put before the country. Right? That's what we should interpret this.
At any moment, I'm sure it'll be coming out tomorrow. Look, this is a piñata that Poilievre loves to whack, and whack it well he has, and it's not. It's still seeing to be plenty full of candies that the Liberals put in to hit. But what's really happening here, of course, we have 1 week of Parliament and then we have a 2-week Easter break. Yep. A lot of people who celebrate Easter or who celebrate that weekend in whatever fashion they do are going to be gathering with their families and their friends. And April 1st comes the day after, on Easter Monday. This is all about getting people to talk about and remember that there is a price increase coming with the climate plan, that it's going to affect you. And guess what? There's a guy who's going to solve it. There's no way the motion is going to be defeated unless we have that crazy kabuki theater of the NDP and the Liberals trying to figure out how they're going to vote that night, and then maybe there is an election. But
they'll make an amendment.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fundraising play, but it's a play to get people talking about it when families are gathering in a few weeks.
Okay, so 2 things on this, Sherelle, and I joke that, it must be their plan is ready to go. But the tax will go up, the rebate will go up. Temperatures have gone up. The hottest winter in Canadian history. They're already conserving water in Alberta because of droughts and wildfires that are still burning from last year that the winter couldn't put out. So, there is the gamesmanship of what's happening in the House of Commons, but every scientist and international organization says this is a climate emergency, and okay, you don't like the carbon tax, as you call it. What is the plan needs to be the conversation, I think. That's the table stakes now, because they ran on something last time, and we don't know what they're going to do this time, should they run.
Yeah, the last time they ran on a carbon price. So
multiple times they've done it, but not now.
Yeah, obviously it's not going to be the case under Poilievre leadership, but you know what? We've been in a climate emergency for quite some time. The difference now is that people are feeling the weight of the cost of living, and that has somehow counterbalancing or outweighing the feeling of any sort of immediacy of needing to do something, or rather needing to do something, but as long as it doesn't cost them anything. And that is where we see the Conservatives really thriving, saying, we'll fix it. We'll do something. We don't have to tell you what it is yet, because what matters right now is that there's money coming out of your pocket, or, as Liberals say, there is also money going into your pocket, and that's money going into your pocket a couple weeks after that price goes up. So there's that tension, and I think the reason the Conservatives are kind of winning that game of public opinion is because they have the economy on their side. They have, or if not the economy, then the prices are, inflation is still a thing. Prices aren't going to be dropping, even though inflation is slowing. People are still feeling the pinch. Mortgages are still coming up for renewal. Interest rates are still high. All of these things are feeding into the fact that they can say, okay, yes, the climate might be an issue if we don't really talk about it that much. That's okay, because the more important thing is that your bank balance and how are you going to live day to day in terms of going to the grocery store and putting gas in your car.
But you know, Jonathan, there's no carbon price on your mortgage. There's no carbon price on your rent. It's not going to make the biggest things go away. Food inflation's gone down, even with the carbon price in place, and Galen West is still running Loblaws, despite what the NDP will tell you. And it's a more complicated issue than that, right? And while you may not need to roll it out for political reasons until the election, there are targets this country is committed to for 2030 and plans take time to be assessed and implemented. So, I mean, doesn't the conversation have to move past the tactics, the strategy, and the optics of this whole thing in Parliament, not just on shows like this?
Well, definitely not in Parliament, because how seldom do we see serious discussions there where we solve world affairs, let alone domestic ones. But, you know, you make a lot of sense. Everything you said, I agree with. But
that's all I wanted. That's
okay.
what no, you go. All right, thank you for watching, everybody.
The problem is that, and we've heard this for months, the carbon tax, the price on pollution was a great idea. They've just sold it poorly, or that it's a communications problem. I mean, yes, there's some truth to it in terms of how much money people get back and how the narrative has changed. And Pierre Poilievre is just very good at the one-liners, and he's axing the tax and striking the hike, I think, is his new one. That's not a solution to anything. But, you know, you talk about how serious the climate crisis is and how, you know, forest fires from last year are still going. But I don't think people have translated that into how it impacts their life, unless they're literally living in the line of sight of the fire. But does it affect my pocketbook? Do I notice the change in my life because it's warmer? Well, you know, I save money on heating because it wasn't so cold this winter. Like, so people, one of the things you need to do is explain that the climate crisis has a massive cost.
Yeah.
But it can't be in the hundreds of millions or billions of dollars. No one knows what that means. It can't be, oh, well, you know, our targets for COP20, whatever number we're at.
Yeah.
That doesn't impact my life. And what the Conservatives have done effectively is say, you are upset about these things that cost you money. In what the Liberals are trying to do, but I think they're slowly getting there, is if you don't do these things, it's going to cost you money. It's going to impact your life. And we cannot continue down this path because financially, your livelihood, your life is going to be impacted severely. Floods where you live, or fires, or whatever it is. I live in Montreal. There were no forest fires anytime, but last summer, or even in the spring, the forest fires in the rest of the country, the smoke went all the way down to the States. So it does have an impact. We're starting to feel it. What does that mean to my life? How is it impacting me, and how is this going to make a difference? Why is it the right thing?
Yeah, and you know, Brad, you get the skeptics, I guess, who push back and say, like, none of this climate action has stopped what's happening right now. It's like, well, wait 20 years without action and see how bad those forest fires are. But there was an editorial in the Globe and Mail on this today, basically saying the feds have messed us up with their communications and with the oil carve-out because they've undermined their policy. Their words, not mine. They say the opposition is misrepresenting the policy, and the premiers are exploiting a political moment to sort of distract from cost of living issues that they either have no capacity or no desire to deal with in their jurisdictions, because you don't see them say, well, we'll give up our excise tax and gas tax at volume to help people. So how do you have a serious conversation about what to do about the planet when you're a country that emits at a high rate per capita, when all anyone wants to talk about is how devastating 3 cents a liter on a price of gas is going to be when some of that's already rebated?
Right. And I think that all of those things can be true at the same time. I don't think it has to be one or the other. I think that where the Liberals, it's not about, are the Conservatives winning? I would submit to you that, well, they're winning the debate. I think it's mostly due, their benefit is the failure of the Liberals. And it's not, I mean, maybe, like I've used this before on the show, like we're talking about they're horrible communicators when it comes to some of their big tickets. It's very complicated. Their plan is very complicated. You know, the notion of a rebate. Then the notion where you actually have to say, I pay a carbon price on certain items I buy, and then the government gives me back more money, and for some reason this is saving the planet. I think where they've really gone wrong, and we talked about the home heating, the carve-out, the minute they did the carve-out, I think the whole thing was done, and now you see liberals at the provincial level saying that they're not interested in bringing them in. I think that's, so we've got New Democrat, Alberta, New Democrat candidates for leader to replace Rachel Notley. They're coming out against this, and this is on the personal side. There is an industrial carbon price, and even conservatives, I think, by and large, are in favor of maintaining those things. So we're just talking about the consumer price. But the Liberals have failed to tell us, are we hitting our targets? Is Canada on the path to hitting their targets? And can you run a thread between those targets being achieved and what we're doing within our pricing of carbon mechanism? Is there a direct correlation between that? Because I do think Canadians do want to contribute to the effort because of extreme weather. And I do agree that things will cost more later if we don't do this.
Well, if you look at the report cards, though, Brad, just sorry to talk about the targets. If you look at what the Climate Institute puts out, if you look at what the Environmental Commissioner puts out, Canada looks like it's on track to hit its 2026 interim target and be within 4 and 5 percentage points of hitting the 2030 target. So they are showing progress, and you know, but it still needs a little bit more tweaking.
Why isn't the Prime Minister? You just played the clip of breathless question period response. Yeah. Why isn't the Prime Minister and Guilbeault, the Environment Minister, at the front bench of this government, singing that from the rooftops that we are on track to meet our targets by and large? That would go a long way for me to saying that if I'm in the Lower Mainland and I'm paying $2 a liter of gasoline, this is going to be the worst summer. By the way, in British Columbia, the minister in charge of water has just announced that this is going to be the worst forest fire season on record in British Columbia. So we're going to be having very intense conversations, not only about carbon pricing, but I think it's about what tools are effective in achieving that, because I think the vast majority of Canadians want to see it effective, but right now they're not. I don't think that the majority are seeing it as an effective tool, and that's why, what is it, 2/3 of all Canadians believe that they'd like to see something else other than the consumer carbon price.
Well, yeah, and look, you know, Tim, maybe there are ways to do it beyond the consumer carbon pricing. You know, it's cap and trade in Quebec, for example. They don't have the consumer pricing, so there are things you can do. But you know, Brad suggested that he thinks industrial carbon pricing would survive a change in government. Jacques Petrov, my colleague in New Brunswick, asked Pierre Poilievre that question when he was there recently, and he didn't answer it. I have no idea if even industrial carbon pricing will survive at the federal level, or he's going to push it all down to the provinces.
Well, in that case, too, the whole argument of predictability, it's the markets that want predictability, but
they sure do.
That want it most. But I just fill the gap here quickly. It's the messaging, yes, Jonathan's right to point out challenge, but it's the messenger, right? Where is the courageous climate messenger with the courageous climate campaign that people are going to accept? Last week, the Prime Minister stepped into a place he maybe should have gone to a long time ago, that I'm not afraid to make tough decisions. The challenge the government has had is they've had all message track. Never mind the carve-out. I mean, they lectured people, and then they tried to induce people, and now they're trying to buy people with, you know, rebates. Nobody who has credibility is out there making the case for this. You know, like the late Prime Minister, Mr. Mulroney. Free trade was unpopular in the day. He made the case in a time when it was not popular. He stuck to it. Somebody, if we want to have a real debate about this, I think somebody has to emerge who's prepared to make the campaign not about what you're going to lose in the short term, but what you can gain in the long term with sacrifice. And we've seen in Canada, in different times, those things have worked, be it free trade, be it the deficit with Mr. Chrétien and Mr. Martin. Yeah. But that isn't the way current politicians are wired.
Yeah, and Sherelle, just on that, you know, in all of the stories about Brian Mulroney and the tributes, people are all trying to attach themselves to individual parts of his legacy. Elizabeth May told a very interesting story that when it came to acid rain, and he wanted to get the Americans on board, he had to show the Americans or promise the Americans that Canada will cut its emissions in half before asking the Americans to do it, because that's how you demonstrate leadership and get buy-in. And this argument, like, why do it here when China and India are doing everything? It's interesting, I thought, to hear that story about how Brian Mulroney's approach in a week where he's being hailed as a great statesman and a leader on things like climate.
Yeah, and so then you say to yourself, well, why don't we want to follow? Why is it always everybody else's problem? Why should we be the ones to, make the sacrifice when, nobody else is holding, for example, China, India's feet to the fire and those types of things. Every time they have, these COP conferences and things like that, and everybody gets together and they try to hash out these declarations and communiques, and they always get watered down. So nobody wants to be the one to carry the load, and that's not going to work, obviously. So nobody wants to be the tall poppy here and ultimately get cut down. So yeah, there does have to be an element of courage from the political class. Right now, what we're seeing and what we've seen for a while, especially with the, things are very different than they were in Mr. Mulroney's time with social media and everything that comes with it. You want to do what's going to make you popular in the short term. You want to do what's going to get you clicks. You want to do what's going to go viral. And saying that we are going to potentially take money out of your pocket or make you have some sort of lifestyle change that you weren't necessarily wanting to do right now, that's not going to win you the votes.
Yeah, no, you make a good point too about carrying the load, and we'll see who's carrying the load when all those firefighters respond to the interior of Alberta and British Columbia like they did last year. All right, gang, we got to leave it there. Thank you very much to the Power Panel: Brad Levine, Jonathan Kalis, Tim Powers, and Sherelle Evelyn. Thanks so much, gang.